Hello, Merle Holloman.
Hi, Rosemary.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me from your home in New York City.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I am so excited to know more about your journey as a company member from 1980 to the spring of 1988. How did you make your way to Toronto Dance Theatre?
Very interesting story. I'm glad you asked because previous to coming to Toronto, to Canada, I had danced with the Alvin Ailey 2 and with Ballet Hispanico of New York. The reason I mention Alvin Ailey 2 is because when I was dancing there, a man named Barry Smith was
Oh,
teaching Graham, and I hated Graham. I just to let you know, I
yes.
came from a ballet background, and ballet was I wanted to be a ballerina. Okay,
Hmm.
that was my dream. And I had started dancing when I was 3 years old. So I always dreamed of being, the Sugar Plum Fairy, whatever. Anyway, when I got into Ailey 2, I still took my ballet classes, did everything on point, but Ailey wanted you to take everything. Like you had to take jazz, ballet,
Huh.
Horton, and Graham. Now Barry's class was the only one I could deal with. I didn't like the real Graham classes, but his seemed different. So I put that in the back of my head. Now I joined Ballet Hispanico. I had to do flamenco, and
Wow.
I really enjoyed dancing there. But after a while, I felt like, okay, I need to move on. And in the Village Voice, there was a picture of this woman with a big rose in her hair, and she had her arms in a flamenco pose. And
Uh-huh.
it said Toronto Dancing. I said, oh, I could do that.
And that would have been Trish Beatty, right?
And Trish Beatty. So I said, let me go to Toronto and audition. I'm
Oh,
not. So I called, and Trisha actually answered my call. She says, oh, that's interesting. We used to have a woman named Merle in the company.
mm.
Now, I'm not thinking because back at Ailey, I knew that Barry had a girlfriend named Merle, but that didn't
Oh.
even clue into me at this point. So I come to Toronto. I'm staying in Peggy Baker's place, and I thought, let me go to the school the day before just to see what this company is all about. And I walk in and I see them doing turns around the back, going, no! And there was this woman behind me. I even forget her name now, but we became friends. She was in the school, TDT. She said, hello, are you here for the audition? And I said, yes. And she said, what's wrong? I said, I don't really like Graham. And I don't, it's been so long since I've done it that I'm going to be a mess at the audition. She says, well, you know what? Just come with me. We're going to go to a class. You could take the class. It'll just give you a little refresher. And she says, I'm sure you'll be fine. She takes me to Pavlichenko, and
Oh.
a woman named Merle is teaching the class.
What?
So I took the class. I loved it. I said, this feels familiar. At the end of the class, who should walk in the door but Barry? And I was like, oh my God. He said, Merle, are you here for the audition? He says, wow, I haven't seen you in so long. I said, yes, I'm here. And he says, well, you know what? I'll put in a good word for you with David. So that's my, that's how I got to TDT. But it
That's
was very,
amazing.
it wasn't until later that I realized, wait a minute, these two people are Canadian and they were in the Toronto Dance Theater.
Mm.
But, so I thought, wow, I was being prepared way before I knew anything by taking class with Barry at Ailey too. So
That's
that's,
fantastic, and they were beautiful dancers. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't get to know them, but I've seen them on video and just stunning artists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So when you got to into the company, what was the repertory like? Like,
Well, the repertory we had, all the choreographers had their work in the repertory. Trish, Peter, David, and Christopher, who seemed to be the up and coming.
Hmm.
It almost felt like David was grooming him
Hmm.
uh, for his future position. I don't know if consciously he was doing that, but anyway, so I loved all the work, but the two people's work that I was featured in mostly is David and Christopher. I'm sorry. I only did one work of Trish, which is
Oh.
Against Sleep. Seemed like, I mean, I guess she felt I wasn't suited to a lot of the things that she did, a lot of her choreography, and
Hmm.
um, it also seemed like size had something to do with it. It seemed like all the things she did were for small people, small women, and so I didn't. It was something like See Still,
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that work too.
hmm hmm So, and then one piece that I did of Peter's, yes, Enter the Dawn, which was a beautiful solo with jazz music,
Hmm.
and it was inspired by an Edward Hopper painting. And it's interesting because right now, in the middle of the pandemic, Edward Hopper has been dubbed as the artist of solitude. And so, I don't know if you've seen a lot of on social media, um, his work is being featured. And I forget what the name of it is, but it's a woman sitting on a bed looking out the window into the morning light.
Hmm.
So that was so I've seen that same piece lately because people are featuring it. And even last week there was a virtual tour of Edward Hopper's work. But I didn't do many other pieces of Peter's. There was one that was really funny.
A Simple
Really
Melody?
a Simple Melody. That was it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Simple
Yes.
Melody. I had fun doing that. And but that's the only other piece of Peter's that I remember doing besides the solo.
And I say, I remember you performing that solo and just being so elegant and so beautiful and stately in your lines. And yeah, I was there when you performed that solo.
I love doing it, and it was one of the highlights of performing there at Toronto Dance Theater.
Were there other pieces that you enjoyed performing while you were there?
Oh yeah, yeah. One and another piece. I love David's work. I was really honored that David asked me once. He says, "So Merle, if I could be one character in literature, which character in particular would I love portraying?" And I told him Desdemona. So that's from Shakespeare's play Othello, and there is a dance in the Jose Limon Dance Company repertory, which I always dreamed of doing, the Mors Vivant.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, you know what? I'm going to choose a character similar to Desdemona, and I'll create a piece based on that character, and you'll be the feature. So he chose Dido and Aeneas.
Mm-hmm.
And that was amazing because, I was so honored that he would ask me and then create a piece based around this character. I love doing that. And we did it quite a bit.
Any other thoughts on your favorite pieces to perform?
I have to say, and I think the person's work that I performed in the most was Christopher,
Oh.
or the work that um, I I really excelled in. Lots of movement,
Mm-hmm.
lots of. I like the fluidity, but also the quirkiness. Um, and Christopher too gave me the opportunity he gave me many solos. Also, I love Christopher's music choices. I think he used Philip Glass quite a bit in the earlier pieces that I was in. The other piece that I loved was Glass Houses. I guess no pun intended. And, I was a central figure in that. And Glass Houses we did quite a bit in the studio, on tour. Um, and one thing that I loved, he invited Rob Besserer from the uh, Lar Lubavitch company to come do a tour with us.
Hmm.
And Rob performed Glass Houses. Now this is a funny story. We were in Green, Wisconsin, right? And we're doing Glass Houses, and there's a lift that comes where you run up to your partner. He lifts you up in the air by the hips and sets you back down carefully. What happened? What happened? Rob kind of didn't set me down carefully.
Oh.
He put me down and I fell. And so, but what I did is I just did a backward roll and jumped up and kept running. So, and then I think we did it in another place. Did we do it in New York City? I think we did it in New York City in the stage outside
Huh.
in the Delacorte Theater, and the stage was slick. So Rob actually slipped and fell on the stage. And he said, "Oh my God, I felt like a big blue whale in that blue unitard." But it just was a piece of such joy and uplift, and you know that's what I loved about Christopher's pieces. There's a lot of movement, a lot of fluidity, like I said, and not necessarily about anything in particular.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I was, the company had choreographic workshops, and I was just wondering, you created quite a few works in your times. I don't know if they were solos or groups or group works. Can you, yeah, speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't think I ever created a group piece. They were always solos.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the reason for that is uh, not only at Toronto Dance Theater, but everywhere else that I danced, there seemed to be certain limitations on what I could do because of my size.
Hmm.
Also, I wasn't really known for somebody who could jump,
Hmm.
like I wasn't known for that. And I was kind of, sad because I never got to do much partnering
Hmm.
because of that. So and then I started thinking, well, maybe I'm not that good. And I thought, no. Why don't you start, instead of thinking this is a negative, start trying to realize what it is about you that is special, how you're unique. So that's why I started doing solos, because I thought, okay, maybe in some of these group pieces, you're not going to get the same amount of challenge that you want because maybe you don't fit in to the choreographer's idea of what it is they want to see as a group. Now, like I said, David created this solo piece for me, and in Christopher's work, I did a lot of solos. So that's why I started creating solos for myself. And the last solo I created for myself is called In a Moment of Harvest. And I thought, let me, okay, I'm not a big jumper, fast mover, this and that. Why don't I create a piece where I hardly move at all and
Hmm.
see? Because I started thinking, what is special about me is my presence. And I thought, is that really enough to hold an audience's attention? I said, well, let's see. So I did it in one of the choreographic workshops. And what I was uh, inspired by was no theater or buto in the Japanese, where they, they'll take maybe 10 minutes to do one movement
Mm.
and hardly move it out. So the movement is almost not recognizable, but then suddenly, they're in a different place. So that was the idea for this piece. Um, I started downstage, right, and went all the way up stage on a diagonal. That was the whole spatial thing of the dance. And within that, it was basically a choreographed walking. There was
Mm.
no musical accompaniment. And so I choreographed it at 18 minutes.
Mm.
And I remember Ron Snipes saying to me, and David Earle, how are you going to, how is the audience going to sit through that with no music? 18 minutes? That's a long time. And you're hardly moving. So I went, oh, well, we'll see. This is a choreographic workshop. It's not going on stage downtown or anything. So the opening evening of the performance, I, I presented my piece, and it ended up timing out at 23 minutes. When I finished, I just heard like
Mm.
that, and there was no applause. There was just like this gasp. So at the reception afterwards, James Kadelka was there, and he came up to me and he said, Merle, I just had no word. You took my breath away.
Ah.
He said, that is the most stunning work I have ever seen, and your best performance. Now, this was towards my end of my time at Toronto Dance Theater. He said, but why was it so short? I burst out.
Wow.
That piece stands out in my mind. I did one other piece. I think it had to be in 1985 because it was in honor of a friend of mine that had passed away of AIDS. I think it's called Memories. It was choreographed to piano music. Forget which piano piece, but Tita Evidente played for that solo. And it's interesting because when I look at it, it has that feeling of the Lamone quality,
Mm.
which is where I ended up going after I left TDT. Um, but also, that solo to me is a precursor to my going to Lamone to study. I got a grant from the Ontario Arts Council, interestingly enough, to come to New York and study. And one of the places I wanted to study was at the Lamone School because I wanted to soften up my edges.
And so you ended up performing for how many years with the Lemon Company after TDT?
I joined Lamone in 1990, and I left the company in 96. So,
Oh.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And can I ask, what was that experience like? Very different from working at Toronto Dance Theatre in comparison to that, or what was that environment like?
It was about the same, very. What I liked about TDT is it seemed everyone got a fair chance, and everyone was respected. Your creativity was honored, and so I mean, it was a little bit different at Lamone because you had this historical work that you were dealing with, so it had to be done specifically. But then we also had people come in and create pieces that the director Carla Maxwell felt reflected the aesthetic of Lamone. I think the two companies that I toured with the most as well. That's the other thing that I want to say is a specific thing that I loved about TDT was for the first time I got to tour all over the world. And I had that same experience with Limon, maybe because I was with those two companies for the longest. When I first started, I started with Earle too. We didn't really tour outside of this country. And then with Ballet Hispanico, I only went on tour once out of the country to France. But Toronto Dance Theater in Limon, we traveled extensively with TDT back and forth across Canada, and then also outside of Canada. It was the same with the Limon Company.
What was that experience like with being with a group of people for so long, traveling and performing? And um, yeah, can you share any thoughts on that? Or
Yeah, I think, any person who has been in a company will say that it is an incredible experience. Mine was positive. I know some people might have had bad experiences, but you become like a family, really, because you are living really with these people a lot. You're living, and so you got a room with somebody, and you're in close quarters with people all the time. And if you're there over years, it's it's really a great feeling. The only part about it that is kind of sad is when you leave, because you have gotten, sometimes it's like a false sense of family, because when you leave, you don't necessarily stay in touch with these people. And so it's in some ways I felt a sense of loss when you leave a company that you've been with for a long time, because you don't necessarily keep in touch with people. You're not doing the same things they're doing anymore. And so, but what I have done recently, which has been so rewarding, is to form a reunion with some members of Ballet Hispanico that I used to dance with, and not realizing it was their 50th anniversary. Now, some of these people I haven't seen since 1974.
wow,
So
yeah.
it's been really great to get in touch again, and a lot of them still live in New York City. And now we're meeting each other on a different uh, frequency, I guess you say, and we stay in touch. So I've done this reunion over the last 2 years. This year we did it virtually, getting back in touch with people after all these years. And it just, even though years have passed, it seems like you can pick up a conversation again as if time really hasn't passed. So
Well,
I
that's
think,
how I feel too, because when you left, you and I, I was came into the company and I was this newbie from fresh out of the School of the Toronto Dance Theater. I had no real clue how to, be a working professional in a dance company. And
mm-hmm,
you took me under your wing essentially and mentored and guided me and which I will be, forever grateful for. And, so, and then when you left, I had every intention of reaching out, but, again, we just sort of lost contact with each other. And then you messaged me in I think it was in June, right? Or July. And I was like, and all that time, I had been thinking, what was Merle up to? Where is she? And then I
uh-huh,
get again out of the blue, and I messaged you earlier this month, and we got to talk and catch up, and it was
mm-hmm,
the most magical conversation. We spent 2 hours on the phone, just
right, right. When you asked me about how was it to be in those companies and travel like that, and I made the mention that it's sad when you had to leave. I think that only applies to that time, right in that moment,
mm,
because now it's like I'm running back into all these people I used to dance with maybe 25, 30, 40 years later. And it's such a joy, and you find out who you really did have a connection with. So very, very interesting. And I'm so glad, because of COVID,
Mm.
you had uh, the event for Christopher online. If that hadn't happened, I don't know if I would necessarily have seen you. That's how I got to get back in touch with you, because you came on speaking for, about working with Christopher and this and that and the other. And I was like, oh my God, Rosemary. And I messaged Christopher. I said, is there any way we can get in touch? So, I mean, there is a good and a bad about this whole pandemic. I mean, it's
Yeah.
brought me back in touch with a lot of people that I might not have necessarily, because, you don't have that same online connectivity if everything was normal. And
Yes.
it has caused people to pause, and, you're doing stuff virtually, taking more time to take time with even people that you do live with, and people that are right in your sphere, especially in New York City. Everybody's always busy, 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 busy. No time to talk, no time. And so it has slowed all that down. And I think that's a good thing. So, not that it's good, but I think it's given us time to reconsider how we're living and working, and how we are relating to one another.
I am just uh, curious to know now, what else are you up to?
Well, um, when I left Limon is basically when I stopped performing. Um, for the most part, I did a lot of independent work,
Mm.
and actually I performed off and on with a man named David Rousseff, who was in Toronto Dance Theater for probably just about a year. And I remember when he left, but he was based in New York City, and he was already working on his own stuff. And he said, if you come back to New York, I would love to have you in my pieces. So I worked with David, um, and I worked with another man named David Gordon, who is well known, I guess, postmodern choreographer. And but I'd say by the 90's, I was, late 90's, I was thinking I really need to find a job. And that was fine for a while, except I was now, I'd say, 90's. The reason I even came back to New York was to take care of my mother, who was doing well.
Mm.
So after I left Limon, I thought, I need to do something that's a little more substantial. If I was living on my own, that independent work would be fine, but it's not, because I have someone else to look after. So, but I didn't know what I was going to do.
Mm.
And a woman that had, choreographer, her name is Phyllis Lamet. She was in the Alan Nicolai company. And she said to me, Merle, why don't you go teach? And I said, where? She goes, Marymount Manhattan College. And I said, yeah, but it's July and they probably already got everybody they need for the. She said, just go. So I did go. I had an interview, and it turned out that it was um, just, I was just the person they needed at the time, because the director of the company was going on sabbatical for 7 months, and they needed someone. So the her assistant was becoming the acting director, and so they needed someone else in her place. So I thought, great, I got work for 7 months. Thing is, the woman on sabbatical never came back to her position, so I was able to stay there and work until when did I leave there? 2003. Unfortunately, I had been there like up until 2000, and the dean that hired me retired. The new dean was questioning why I was there because, as he put it, I had no education. I had gone to college, yet I was still teaching in a full-time assistant professor position.
Mm.
So to make the long story short, I showed him my resume and he said, "Oh, you know, oh, okay." He said, "Well, you know what? You still have, because by this time you needed to have at least an undergraduate to be teaching in any capacity in a college or university. So he said, if you start working on your undergraduate degree, I will consider renewing your contract next year." So I said, fine. I started, but I needed a language. That was the one thing that I couldn't find. All the languages that I thought I would just breeze through, no problem: French, Spanish, Italian, um, German, they were all happening at the same time I was teaching. So I said, what is this? ASL,
Mm.
American Sign Language. I thought, oh, maybe I'll try that. I tried it. I fell in love with it, and the rest is history. I'm very much involved in the deaf community. My and I later went on to school um, in 2000, from 2008 to 2012. I went to LaGuardia Community College and graduated with an associate's degree in deaf studies. My goal is to become an interpreter. That has not happened yet. However, I love sign language. I love the deaf community, and I think the connection is a way of expressing yourself with your body and your hands, and it's just beautiful. Now, the at the same time, you asked me what I'm doing. In When I left teaching at Marymount, I had been experiencing problem with my hip, so I had a hip replacement. And after that, I was not able to go back to dance right away, right? So I'm thinking, what do I do now? I've never done anything but dance. So I was wondering what I was going to do. And I went to, I don't know if they still have this in Toronto, the transition, career transition for
Yeah,
dancers.
we have the Dancers Transition Center here. Yeah.
Right. I went to that here, and they advised me to go to another place that's connected called the Actors Work Program. And I spoke with a lady there, and I said, they have a job search thing every week, and spoke to the counselor, told her my experience. She says, oh, here's something: tour guide, New York City tour guide. And I was like, what? I said, I don't know if I can do that. Like, talk to people. She says, listen, you have taught dance for 6 years. All you have to do is pretend like you're teaching New York City history, and you'll be fabulous. And so they also had a crash course, because you have to take a test to become a New York City, like a licensed tour guide. You have to take a test, which is very involved. So the man who at the time was the master of tour guides gave this crash course. I took the test and then started working on the buses. I did that for a year, and it was great until, because this one bus company was just starting up, and they wanted people who could tell a story, who could be entertaining, um, and so they hired actors, dancers,
Mm.
and the company had a great start, So once they got the company up and running, then they felt they didn't need us anymore. They didn't want to pay. They were paying a good wage, and that's what we all loved about it. Once they were up and running, it was almost into the first full year. They started hiring people for this half the hourly wage they were paying us. And they started doing things that were really, not good. And I was getting more and more like, I don't want to work there anymore. Just speaking about the tour guide supervisor for this bus company that told me later that the company had been asking him to write up false reports about us original tour guides so they have a paper trail and have a way to get rid of us. He refused to do that and left. A year later, when I'm feeling like I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do this anymore, out of the blue, I get a call from him and he says, "Hi, Merle, how are you? You know, I've been thinking about you. What are you up to?" And I told him, and he says, "Well, how would you like to come work at the Empire State Building?" And I said, "Yes!" Right away. The reason why is because it is a union job. Have your uniform you have to wear. Everything is ordered. You know, there's with this particular bus company, there were no set rules. You gave your timesheet to the bus dispatcher on the street and prayed that you were going to get paid correctly.
Mm.
No breaks, nothing. So that was 2006. I started working at the Empire State Building, and I've been working there ever since.
Oh, wow.
So my tour guide experience came in handy there. The other thing that I did for a while was, wanting to practice my sign language, improve my skills. I would invite my friends, deaf friends, and just, you know, show them around the building. One of the perks of that is if anybody that wants to come, I can get them discounted tickets with my employee discount. And so that was what their benefit, my benefit was to practice my signing with them. So it's, yes, that's what I'm
Wow.
doing currently.
What a story. What a life you've led so far.
Can I tell you one more thing? How
Absolutely.
what, because I just saw her, when was it? Wednesday night. Okay. Now, when I first started seriously studying, I went to, and I still am in touch with the people that own the Sign Language Center in New York City. And one of my first teachers, who I love, mentor, she's wonderful. Her name is Alexandria Wales. And she really encouraged me, those times when you feel like, oh, I can't get this. Same as dancing, I'm never going to get this. She just kept encouraging me. Now, you have to go back in time. When I was at Earle too, this is 1974, 75, there was a Broadway production choreographed and composed by a woman named Entazaki Shanga for colored girls who considered suicide when the rainbow was enough. Now, a woman that I was working with at the time who worked at Earle with Earle 2 suggested I audition for that because she was doing the choreography. Her name is Diane McIntyre. And she suggested I audition for the girl in purple. Yes, so I didn't get the part in this piece. I'll just refer to it as Colored Girls from now on because the title is too long. I didn't get the part, but I was still so excited because it was my first big audition. It was just thrilling to audition. Anyway, going forward to November 2019, the Public Theater here in New York City redid this play. They said it was a reimagining of Colored Girls. And who should be cast in the girl in purple but Alexandria Wales? Now, I went to the performance. I went to the performance that was geared towards the deaf. They had an interpreter, but the interesting thing about the performance is that Alexandria, nobody really voiced for her. She signed her role. And the other interesting thing about the piece is that although it was from such a long time ago, it didn't seem dated at all. They had a panel discussion afterwards where they talked about all the actors. I forget how many women, it might be 8 or 9, for all the different colors in the rainbow. Um, they all spoke about how this woman that directed the play this time asked them to first take the woman's part that they were playing, read it over, and see how they could bring their personal experience to bear on that role. So that's why each woman was so invested in it, because it really was kind of autobiographical. And um, the other thing they discussed was how educational it was for all the hearing people to work with Alexandria. This is her normal life. She lives in a hearing world, but none of them had ever met a deaf person before, let alone a deaf actor. So it, they kind of bonded around that. They bond, and it was just so beautiful to me to hear that, because since I've been involved, I just keep thinking, this is the way it should be. Why should the deaf be such a mystery to the rest of us, Um, and it was a wonderful experience to hear that explanation. But then when they had a question and answer period, I didn't have any questions. I just had to tell them how magnificent the work was. Said hello to Alexandria. She didn't know I was there. And tell her, tell them that my experience, that I had actually auditioned for this same part, that I felt was such a connection to the piece, that it was relevant to today, and that it was just amazing to see that how many years later. I'm just kind of amazed at how things are interconnected. I just am amazed at how, even though I feel like I left the dance world a long time ago, how what I'm involved in now has reconnected me back to my experience in dance. And so it's both present and past. And I think if we all looked into our more into our experiences, we would find that, you know, it it's just amazing to me how it just has kind of popped up without me really realizing it ahead of time.
Wow. Thank you, Merle, so much for just sharing your story, sharing your life, sharing your experiences. I appreciate knowing more about you because, even though we were in the company at the same time together, you never really know someone,
No, you
but,
don't.
and you never really know what they're going through and how they're, coping
Mm-hmm.
and, what their life journey has taken them afterwards. So it's just been wonderful to hear your memories and your thoughts, your perspective on, yeah, just living in this world and um, sharing in this world with other people. It's beautiful to hear, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Rosemary. My pleasure.